The storm rolled in without warning. Gotham was no stranger to the chaos of heavy rain. But tonight was different. There was an electric charge in the air that seemed to hum beneath the pulse of the city. The streets, usually dark and empty at this hour, felt alive, vibrating with tension as lightning split the sky. Batgirl crouched on the edge of a rooftop, her black and yellow suit barely visible against the shadows. Her sharp eyes scanned the horizon, focused on the flickering lights of the city below. The rift had appeared out of nowhere, an unexplainable burst of energy that had torn through the fabric of the city's reality. It was like nothing she had ever encountered. Her gloved fingers tightened on the edge of the building as another bolt of lightning struck the sky, brighter and more violent than the last. She gritted her teeth. "Where are you?" she muttered to herself, wondering if this rift was the result of another villain's twisted game, or something more dangerous than she could imagine. Then, with a deafening crack of thunder, the world seemed to warp. A tear in the sky, like a gash in the very fabric of the universe, appeared right above Gotham. It was like watching the very stars themselves bend and twist to something. No, someone began to emerge from the storm. Batgirl's heart stuttered in her chest, a strange sense of awe creeping through her despite the imminent danger. There, in the dark clouds, a figure descended, bathed in a supernatural glow. The wind whipped through her hair as she watched in stunned silence. THOR. His silhouette was unmistakable. Tall, godlike, his body cloaked in heavy armor that gleamed even in the city's dim light. His cape billowed around him like a living thing as he landed on the rooftop beside her with a crack that sent a ripple through the air. His eyes were blazing with the power of the storm itself. Thunder rumbled as he stood tall, holding his enchanted hammer, Mjolnir, as if it was an extension of his very being. For a moment, neither of them moved. Batgirl's eyes widened, taking in the sight of the Asgardian god, his posture so commanding it seemed to make the very atmosphere around him tense with energy. Thor's presence was like a storm personified, untamable, wild, and impossible to ignore. "Who are you?" Batgirl's voice was low, steady, yet tinged with the curiosity she couldn't suppress. She instinctively placed a hand on her utility belt, ready for anything, but part of her wanted to wait. To see. Thor's gaze flickered over her, a slight smile curling at the edge of his lips. "I am Thor, son of Odin. And you are Gotham's protector." His voice was deep, carrying a weight of authority that almost seemed to echo off the walls around them. Batgirl didn't flinch. "I am Batgirl. And you, Thunder God, seem a bit out of place." Her tone was teasing, sharp, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of admiration. She was used to dealing with the unexpected. But this was on a whole different level. Thor's gaze softened, his laughter rumbling like distant thunder. "Out of place, perhaps, but I sense something familiar here, something powerful." He looked at her as if seeing a kindred spirit, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps you have some insight into this disturbance." Batgirl took a breath, her fingers loosening their grip. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. But you're the last person I expected to drop into Gotham tonight." Before she could say more, the rift above them flared again, and Batgirl's eyes narrowed. The world trembled as another burst of energy surged from it. She turned to Thor. "We'll figure this out later. Right now, we've got bigger problems." With a nod, Thor gripped Mjolnir tighter. "Lead the way, Batgirl." Together, they turned toward the chaos unfolding in the heart of Gotham, where the storm had only just begun. The air between them crackled, not just with the fury of the storm, but with the undeniable, unspoken bond of two warriors about to face the unknown together. Batgirl moved swiftly across the rooftop, her boots barely making a sound as she glanced over her shoulder to see Thor keeping pace effortlessly beside her. The storm raged on above, casting jagged flashes of lightning over the city. Gotham was eerily quiet, the usual hum of the streets muffled under the heavy cloak of impending chaos. The rift, whatever it was, felt like it was growing stronger by the second, and Batgirl's mind raced to connect the dots. She wasn't sure what this godly stranger had to do with the storm, but there was no time to waste. She glanced at Thor, his golden armor gleaming even in the dim light, his expression set and focused. "So," she said, breaking the tension between them, her voice light and teasing. "You've been to Earth before." Thor's gaze flicked to her, a wry grin tugging at his lips. "I've had my fair share of encounters with your world, yes, though I admit your Midgardian food is peculiar." His eyes glinted with amusement, the deep rumble of his voice vibrating with the hint of a joke. Batgirl couldn't help but laugh, the sound sharp against the howling wind. "You've never had an Aurelian middia." Thor looked at her, genuinely puzzled. "An Aurelian? What?" The moment hung between them, like the calm before the storm. Batgirl slowed her pace just slightly, a smirk playing on her lips as she reached into the pouch on her utility belt and pulled out a small, alien-looking fruit. The Aurelian middia was a rare delicacy she had discovered during one of her many undercover missions, a fruit with golden orange skin and small, delicate purple veins running across it. It was said to have the taste of an ancient, long-forgotten spice, unlike anything found on Earth. "This," she said, holding it out to him, "is an Aurelian middia. You won't find anything like it on your Asgardian table. Trust me." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "But if you're not brave enough to try it, I'll understand." Thor's brow furrowed, a glint of challenge dancing in his eyes. "Brave enough?" He grinned, his voice thick with mock offense. "I am Thor, god of thunder. I do not shy from challenges." Without another word, he took the fruit from her and inspected it for a moment. Then, with a dramatic flair, he bit into it, his eyes watching her all the while. The fruit's skin was soft yet firm, releasing a burst of juice as Thor chewed, his expression changing from confident to intrigued. His face softened in a surprising way, as if he were savoring something deeply. "Strange, but delightful," he said, his voice laced with wonder. Batgirl watched him carefully, her gaze flickering to the way his features softened, as if this simple moment had brought them closer, even if only for a second. It was strange, she thought, how a small exotic fruit could bridge the gap between two vastly different worlds. The brief exchange between them felt oddly intimate, the storm around them momentarily fading into the background. She smiled, amused. "I told you. I'm full of surprises." Thor's smile deepened, but there was something more in his gaze now, something warmer, more genuine. "You are indeed," he said softly, and for a moment, they stood there, locked in a silent understanding. The sudden scream that pierced the air broke the spell. Batgirl snapped into action, her body moving before she even thought. She sprinted across the rooftop, leaping into the air to grab hold of a nearby ledge, pulling herself up to see what had caused the noise. Below in the alley, shadows moved with unnatural speed. "Stay focused," she called back to Thor, who had followed her without hesitation, Mjolnir in hand. "What is it?" Thor asked, his voice serious now, the jovial warmth slipping away. "Something's down there, and it's not human," Batgirl said, her heart racing as she prepared for the fight ahead. The city's shadows shifted once more, and Batgirl's instincts flared. She was ready for whatever was coming, but something about the air tonight felt different, more dangerous, and with Thor by her side, she knew they would have to face this new threat together, no matter what. But the question lingered. Was the storm just the beginning of something far darker? The alley was drenched in shadows, the usual Gotham grime clinging to the crumbling walls like a second skin. But tonight, something was different. The air was thick with a pulse, a strange hum that vibrated in the bones of anyone close enough to feel it. Batgirl crouched low, eyes scanning the darkness, every muscle coiled in anticipation. Beside her, Thor's presence was like a storm made flesh, Mjolnir crackling softly in his grip as he stood at the ready. Batgirl could feel the tremor in her chest, the unmistakable warning that something far more sinister than ordinary criminals was lurking. Her fingers brushed the edges of her batarangs, eyes narrowing as the sound of footsteps echoed through the alley, too rhythmic, too deliberate to be a random passerby. Without a word, she surged forward, her body a blur of motion as she swung herself around a corner, landing silently in the shadows. Thor followed, his heavy boots sounding like thunder against the concrete as he towered over her. Together, they moved like two sides of the same coin, silent, deadly, unstoppable. Then she saw them. Figures cloaked in darkness, their forms shifting in ways that didn't make sense. Batgirl's heart stuttered. They weren't human. The shapes twisted and blurred, their movements unnatural, almost as if they were phasing in and out of existence. Each one had glowing eyes, amber and sharp, and their faces were obscured by black veils that shimmered in the night. They were silent, moving with the grace of predators, and yet there was an eerie stillness in the way they stood, as if they were waiting for something. Thor stepped forward, his voice a low rumble. "What manner of creatures are these?" Batgirl's gaze flickered to him. "They're not from this world." Her mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. "They've come through the rift." A chill spread through the alley as the creatures locked their eyes on Batgirl and Thor. The air seemed to thicken, and Batgirl's skin prickled with the sensation of being washed by something ancient, something powerful. Without warning, one of the creatures lunged, its body distorting midair as it reached for Batgirl. Her reflexes kicked in instantly. She twisted, using the momentum of the creature's attack to sidestep and deliver a spinning kick to its side. The force of the blow sent the creature crashing into the wall with a sickening thud, but it didn't stay down for long. The thing scrambled to its feet, unhurt, its amber eyes flashing in fury. "Impossible," Batgirl muttered under her breath. Thor didn't wait for her to speak again. He charged, Mjolnir raised high, and with a single swing, he struck one of the creatures squarely in the chest. Lightning exploded from a hammer, enveloping the figure in a blinding surge of energy. The creature shrieked as the lightning seared through its body, but it too didn't fall. Instead, it dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, reappearing moments later, as if nothing had happened. Batgirl's mind was racing. These were no ordinary enemies. They didn't feel pain. They didn't follow the rules. She exchanged a quick look with Thor. "We need to find their weak point. Fast." Thor gripped Mjolnir tighter. "Then we'll make our own rules." With that, they fought. Batgirl moved like lightning, flipping and dodging with the grace of a dancer, her fists and batarangs flying in quick succession. She caught one creature in the chest with a perfectly timed throw, the batarang embedding itself in its shoulder. The creature howled, but it still didn't stop. It merely snarled and came back for more. Thor's strikes were brutal, each blow shaking the very air. But every time he took down one of the creatures, it reappeared like a phantom. They weren't fighting flesh. They were fighting shadows, nightmarish specters of something far darker than they had ever encountered. And yet, as they fought side by side, there was a strange pull between them. In the heat of battle, amidst the flashing lightning and swirling darkness, Batgirl felt something stir deep within her, a connection, unspoken but undeniable. The chaos around them felt oddly synchronized, as if they were two halves of a whole, fighting not just to survive, but to keep each other alive. But there was no time to acknowledge it. The creatures kept coming, their numbers growing, their power seeming to multiply with every strike. Batgirl's heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the weight of the world bearing down on her. This wasn't just a fight for Gotham anymore. This was a battle for the very fabric of reality itself. And they were losing. In the back of her mind, a terrifying thought began to form. What if this was just the beginning? What if the rift was a doorway to something far worse? But there was no time for doubts. The fight wasn't over yet. Not as long as they stood. The battle raged on, each strike, each blow feeling like the world itself was shattering around them. Batgirl's movements were a blur, her every muscle burning as she launched herself into the fray. Her batarangs found their mark with deadly precision. But the creatures, they never stayed down. They twisted and reformed, as if they were nothing more than shadows, here one moment and gone the next. Beside her, Thor's strength was unmatched. Mjolnir crackled with raw energy, its power lighting up the dark alley in a burst of blinding light every time it struck. But even the mighty god of thunder was beginning to tire. His once effortless swings were slower, more labored, as if the creature's relentless assault was wearing down not just his body, but his spirit. "Why won't they stay down?" Batgirl shouted, ducking under a slash from one of the creatures, her mind racing. Each second felt like an eternity, the weight of the situation settling on her like a heavy cloak. They were being overwhelmed, and she could feel it in her bones. No matter how many of these things they defeated, more seemed to rise up in their place. "We need to close the rift." Thor's voice was urgent, but tinged with exhaustion, "before it consumes everything." Batgirl's heart skipped a beat at his words. The rift, the gateway to this nightmare, wasn't just a doorway to other worlds. It was a wound, a tear in the very fabric of reality, and they were running out of time to stop it. But there was something else. The creatures, they weren't just mindless beasts. They had a purpose, a plan. They were trying to keep them from reaching the source of the rift. Something powerful, something ancient was drawing them in, pulling at the edges of their resolve. With a sharp gasp, Batgirl's eyes snapped open. There was no more time. If they didn't act now, they would be swallowed up by the very thing they were trying to fight. "I know how to stop this," Batgirl said, her voice steady, even as her heart raced. She could feel the weight of the decision settling on her like a stone. But it had to be done. "Thor, there's a way to close the rift, but it requires a sacrifice." Thor looked at her, his brow furrowed. What kind of sacrifice? The question hung in the air, thick with the unspoken truth. Batgirl didn't want to say it. She didn't want to think about it, but the answer was clear. It was the only way. A soul must be bound to the rift, to stabilize it, to keep it from tearing open again. Batgirl said, her voice a whisper, but it felt like thunder in the stillness between them. "And once it's done, that soul is lost. Forever." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The creatures around them were frozen in place, their amber eyes glowing with an unnatural stillness. Batgirl's breath caught in her chest. She couldn't bring herself to look at Thor, not when she knew the weight of the choice she was about to make. The rift wasn't just a threat to Gotham, it was a threat to everything. And someone had to make the ultimate sacrifice. "Are you suggesting that you?" Thor's voice was a mixture of disbelief and dread. She nodded, her heart breaking at the thought of it. "Yes, I have to do it. I'm the one who's tied to this city, to its very heartbeat. If anyone can do it, it's me." Thor's expression hardened, his eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness. "No." He stepped toward her, shaking his head. "I will do it. I'm the god of thunder. I will not let you make this choice alone." Batgirl's heart twisted in her chest. She reached out, her gloved hand brushing his arm. "Thor, please. This is my fight. I've always known the risks. This city, this world, it needs me." Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as if the world around them stood still, the weight of their words heavy between them. The rift pulsed, its dark energy pressing in on them, reminding them of the limited time they had left. "No," Thor repeated, his voice firm. "We do this together, or not at all." Batgirl's eyes searched his face, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She wanted to protect him, to keep him safe, but she also knew that this was the only way to save them all. "Together," she whispered. And with that simple word, they made their decision. The ground beneath them began to tremble. Gotham's skyline flickered in and out of focus, the city's once familiar shape warping, as though reality itself were being undone. The rift above them pulsed with an ominous energy, its swirling colors shifting from deep black to a sickly green, as if some ancient force were stirring inside. The creatures, once scattered, now gathered in a tight formation, their glowing eyes locked onto Batgirl and Thor, as if sensing the coming change. "You're sure about this?" Thor's voice was steady, but his gaze was sharp, searching Batgirl's face for any sign of hesitation. His armor gleamed faintly in the storm's light, his grip on Mjolnir unwavering, but there was a trace of vulnerability beneath his determined exterior. Batgirl didn't answer immediately. She stood tall, her back straight, eyes fixed on the rift. Her chest tightened with the weight of what she was about to do. She had known, deep down, that this moment would come. Gotham had always been her burden to bear, its dark streets and secrets her responsibility. She had never asked for it, but she had always accepted it. "This is the only way to stop it," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "If we don't, everything, everyone, is going to be consumed." Thor didn't argue. He simply nodded, understanding that sometimes heroes had to make the hardest choices, and Batgirl was no stranger to sacrifice. She had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This wasn't just about saving the city. This was about saving the very fabric of the world they knew. Together, they stepped forward, the storm swirling around them, the sound of the wind drowning out all other noise. The creatures began to advance, but Batgirl and Thor stood firm. The time for hesitation had passed. The time for action had come. As they neared the rift, the very air seemed to thicken, the pressure building as if the world itself were holding its breath. Batgirl's heart hammered in her chest. The rift beckoned them, its dark energy pulling at her like a magnet, whispering promises of power, of destruction, of chaos. But she refused to listen. She couldn't. Not now. The creatures howled in unison, a sound that sent chills down Batgirl's spine. But she didn't flinch. She was no longer afraid. She was focused, driven by a single purpose. "We do this together," Thor said again, his voice firm, unwavering. He raised Mjolnir high, the hammer glowing with the power of 1,000 storms. The air around them crackled with energy, the very ground beneath them vibrating with the force of the rift. Batgirl took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Thor's. There was no turning back now. They had made their choice. Together, they would close the rift. Together, they would save the world or die trying. She reached out, her gloved hand brushing his. "Together," she whispered. With a single coordinated move, they stepped into the rift. The world around them shattered. The instant they crossed the threshold, everything changed. Time and space seemed to bend and stretch, and the very fabric of reality felt as though it were unraveling. The sound of the storm, of Gotham's streets, vanished into the void. All that remained was the swirling blackness that engulfed them, suffocating, endless. Batgirl's chest tightened as the darkness pressed in, but she forced herself to breathe, to focus. She could feel the rift pulling at her, trying to drag her deeper into its abyss, but she couldn't let it win. Not now. Not when she was so close. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened, his power surging as he swung the hammer, creating a ripple of energy that pushed back against the darkness. The rift shrieked, its edges flickering like a dying flame. But still, it fought. Still, it wanted to devour them. Batgirl could feel her strength waning, her body growing heavy, her mind clouded with the overwhelming force of the rift's power. But she didn't give in. She couldn't. For Gotham. For the people she swore to protect. And for Thor. With one final push, she reached out, her hand outstretched toward the heart of the rift. Her fingers brushed against its surface, and in that instant, everything stopped. The rift shuddered, its dark energy writhing in agony. The world around them seemed to break apart, reality itself splintering as the rift began to close. But the effort was immense. The power required was beyond anything Batgirl had ever felt before. It was as if the universe itself was screaming in resistance. And then, with a violent explosion of light and sound, the rift collapsed, leaving nothing but a still, suffocating silence. They had done it. But at what cost? The world held its breath. For a fleeting moment, Batgirl and Thor stood at the center of nothingness, surrounded by an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on forever. The rift, the abyss that had threatened to devour Gotham, and beyond, was gone. The storm that had raged through the city was no more, its violent winds replaced by a deathly stillness. Batgirl's heart thudded painfully in her chest, her body trembling from the exertion, but there was no time to rest, no time to recover. The fight wasn't over. It could never be. She looked around, her mind scrambling to piece together what had just happened. The world felt wrong, distorted. Everything seemed to ripple, like the fabric of reality had been bent and stretched beyond repair. The ground beneath her feet felt unstable, as if it might crumble away at any moment. And then she felt it. A pressure. Cold. Crushing. It was as though the weight of the universe itself was bearing down on her, pulling at her very soul. Batgirl gasped, her breath catching in her throat, and her knees buckled beneath her. She fell to the ground, hands splayed against the cold, cracked earth, the world spinning around her. Thor, who had stood by her side through everything, now moved swiftly to her, his powerful hands reaching out to steady her. "Batgirl," he said, his voice low and thick with concern, but there was something in his eyes now, something she hadn't expected. Fear, genuine fear. She met his gaze, her breath shallow, but she forced herself to stand. "I'm fine," she lied, though the pain in her chest said otherwise. She could feel the pull of the rift still lingering in her, an emptiness that wasn't just physical. It was as if a part of her had been taken, a part of her soul sacrificed to close the rift. Thor's grip tightened on her arm, his brow furrowing. "You're not fine. What have you done?" Batgirl shook her head, trying to steady herself. "I had no choice. The rift needed to be closed, and someone had to." Her words faltered as she looked around, her mind racing. The creatures, they were gone. The darkness that had plagued Gotham for so long had lifted. But there was something else now, something darker. The city felt empty, cold, as if the life had been drained from it, and in its place was a hollow silence that echoed through the streets. Gotham was safe, but it was different, and Batgirl wasn't sure she could ever go back to the way things were. Thor took a step back, his voice softer now, tinged with sadness. "You should have let me do it. This wasn't your burden to carry alone." Batgirl closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. She wanted to argue, to tell him that she had to do it, that she was the one who had been here, who had fought for Gotham all these years. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wasn't just Batgirl. She was a part of this city, and the city was a part of her. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This was my choice. I was ready to make it." Thor looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something, waiting for the inevitable aftermath. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until finally, Batgirl broke it. "We need to go back," she said, her voice stronger now, despite the exhaustion that still gripped her. "Gotham still needs us. There's no time for us to fall apart." Thor nodded, his expression softening as he stepped closer, offering his support. "You're right. The city may be safe for now, but there will always be threats. We'll face them together." Batgirl met his gaze, her heart swelling with an unfamiliar warmth. Despite the pain, despite the sacrifice, there was something else she felt. A connection. A bond forged in the fires of battle, strengthened by the shared understanding of what it meant to be a hero. Together, they walked through the empty streets of Gotham, side by side, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The city might have been saved, but the cost had been high. And Batgirl knew, deep down, that it would never be the same again. Not for her, not for anyone. But perhaps in time, they could rebuild. Together. The streets of Gotham were eerily quiet. Batgirl and Thor walked side by side, their footsteps the only sound that broke the silence. The city they once knew, the Gotham that was alive with chaos, danger, and the constant hum of its dark heart, was now a ghost of itself. The neon lights that once flickered in the night seemed dimmer, the shadows deeper. The air felt heavier, as if the very breath of the city had been stolen. Batgirl could feel the emptiness in her chest. It wasn't just the physical ache that remained from the sacrifice she had made to close the rift. It was something deeper, something more profound. Her connection to Gotham had always been one of fierce loyalty, of an unspoken bond. But now, with the rift sealed, it felt as though that bond had been severed. She was no longer fully herself. Something inside her had been lost. She glanced at Thor, his face set in grim determination, as he surveyed the city around them. The god of thunder, once a force of nature in every battle, now appeared weary. The power he had wielded so effortlessly moments ago seemed drained, and though his armor still gleamed in the faint light of the street lamps, it felt like he was carrying an invisible weight. But then there was the flicker of something in his eyes, something more than just the exhaustion of a battle fought. There was worry, concern, for her. "It's not over," Batgirl said, breaking the silence between them. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened. Thor didn't look at her, but she could hear the depth of his understanding in his voice. "I know." She stopped, looking up at the tall, looming buildings around them. Gotham's skyline, once a symbol of strength and resilience, now felt like a prison. It was as if the city itself was mourning, and she was too, in a way, mourning the loss of something she couldn't quite name. The cost of victory had been high, and she could feel the echoes of it rippling through every inch of this city. Thor paused beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You did what had to be done," he said quietly. "Gotham will heal, in time." She looked up at him, her expression guarded. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can feel the city anymore." For the first time since they had begun this journey together, she allowed herself to show a crack in her armor. She was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of losing. Tired of carrying the weight of this city on her shoulders. "You're not alone in this." Thor's voice was a steady anchor amidst the storm of her emotions. "I'm with you. We'll rebuild this city together." Her breath caught in her throat as his words sank in. His presence, his unwavering resolve, was a comfort, but it also made something else stir inside her. A question, unspoken, lingering between them like a shadow. Was she ready to allow someone else in? Could she let go of the burden, even for a moment? Batgirl pushed the thought away, her jaw tightening as she straightened her back. "We've got work to do. The city may be quiet now, but I know it won't stay that way for long." Thor nodded, understanding. The calm before the storm. They both knew it. Gotham would always need its protectors, always need heroes to rise when darkness crept back in. But this time, it felt different. The weight of the world had shifted, and the future was uncertain. As they continued their walk, Batgirl felt a stirring in her chest, a flicker of something. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. But it was there, faint but undeniable, like a spark waiting to ignite. The city wasn't done with them yet, and neither were they. They walked on, through the quiet streets, toward an unknown future, side by side. The first light of dawn broke through the thick clouds, casting a pale golden hue across the city's skyline. Gotham had always been a city of darkness, a place where shadows stretched long, and the night seemed to last forever. But now, as the sun's rays crept over the horizon, it felt as though something had changed. Something had shifted. The promise of a new day hung in the air, like the scent of rain on the pavement. Batgirl stood on the rooftop of a crumbling building, her silhouette stark against the early morning light. Her cape fluttered lightly in the breeze, a soft reminder of the battle she had fought, of the price she had paid. The city below her seemed quieter now, almost peaceful, as if the chaos of the previous days had been wiped clean in an instant. But she knew better. Gotham's peace was always fleeting. It was just a lull in the storm. She turned, her eyes meeting Thor's. The god of thunder stood beside her, his presence a comforting force, even now. His once vibrant armor now appeared worn, the shine dimmed by the weight of their shared experiences. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet strength that mirrored her own. They had both made sacrifices. They had both given everything to save the world. And yet, neither of them could shake the feeling that there was more to come. "We did it," Batgirl said, her voice soft, but laced with a mix of pride and exhaustion. "But I don't think this is over. Not really." Thor nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the horizon, as if searching for the answer in the distance. "No, it's not over. It never truly is. But that doesn't mean we're alone in it. You've got me, and I've got you. Together, we'll face whatever comes next." She smiled at his words, but it was a quiet smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. She knew what he meant, of course. She wasn't alone, not anymore. But there was still a lingering emptiness inside her, a void left behind by the sacrifice she had made. She could feel it in every breath, every heartbeat. The rift was gone, but a part of her had been sealed within it, a part of her soul. And no matter how many times she told herself it was worth it, no matter how many victories she celebrated, the truth remained. Some things couldn't be undone. "I've always been alone," Batgirl said, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Even when I've had people by my side, I've carried this city by myself. I don't know how to change that." Thor stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry it alone. Not anymore. Gotham has a new protector now, one who understands what it means to fight for something bigger than herself." Batgirl looked up at him, their eyes meeting in the soft light of dawn. There was something unspoken between them, a bond forged in the fires of their shared battle. They had both seen the darkness, both felt the weight of the world pressing down on them. But now, in this quiet moment, they had a choice. They could choose to move forward together, or they could let the past define them. Without a word, Batgirl reached out, her hand finding his. It was a small gesture, but in that touch, there was a promise. A promise that, no matter what, they would face the future side by side. That together, they could rebuild. Together, they could be the heroes Gotham needed. The first rays of the sun bathed the city in light, and for the first time in a long time, Batgirl allowed herself to believe in the possibility of hope. Gotham might never be free of its darkness, but with Thor by her side, she was ready to fight, ready to rise. Together, they would face whatever storm came next, and when the next battle came, they would not face it as separate forces, but as a team, united in purpose, in strength, and in something deeper: love.